help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. When she just came out, she told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. So we had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. If you have not ordered it, we haven't done a shameless book plug in a while. Get What to Say When To, particularly with everything going on in our culture and politically, no matter what side you're on, you will need to know how to discuss abortion. And What to Say When To, thanks to you, has become a bestseller. And as a reminder, if you buy it directly from 40 Days for Life, you get a signed copy with, you won't know whether I signed it or Steve signed it because the handwriting is so terrible. But you will also get free shipping if you order it directly from us and you support our mission. So that is always a good thing. And somebody who ceases to support our mission at all times is Mr. Steve Carlin.
I cease supporting our mission?
Yes.
How is that?
You're having an off day in the pro-life movement, in my opinion.
Oh, okay.
You're ceasing to support our mission.
I'm going to do better.
Thank you. That was a good response. Heather, you're having a great day.
I am having a great day.
Your hair looks wonderful.
Thank you.
We were talking about Heather's
Appreciate
hair
it.
off here. That's an inside joke.
And it's not fake.
And it's not fake. It's real. Okay. I had a great sociological experience recently, and I have Steve Carlin to thank for it. Okay?
Who's having a bad day now?
I know. You're looking really good, actually. Things are turning up for you. They're going to be very good. So
70 seconds. That's all it took.
Look, the problem is, like, even my sister's, like, texting me. She's like, the day after the election, or did you break down the election the night of doing the Trump voice? And Mary Lisa just, like, walks out and then goes in the other room. Number one, that didn't happen. It did happen, but Mary Lisa likes the Trump impression. Number two, the problem was I got, like most people, like 3-4 hours of sleep that night, because I was staying up. I had, like, buddies texting me, like, we're drinking bourbon. This is awesome. And I'm like, I just had coffee. I'm trying to stay up all night. So I get up, and I'm, like, bouncing around because I was happy about the election results. And so I'm, like, making breakfast for the kids, and I don't realize it, but the kids are like, you're talking like Donald Trump. The whole time. It's like, these eggs, you have never had eggs like this. They're eggs like nobody's seen before. People from all over the place just say, where'd you get the eggs? I made them. So it was kind of just, I think it was the drowsiness. But we went to a social function recently, my wife and I. And it was a lot of fun. It was a Catholic fundraiser. And there I met a priest. And I didn't recognize him, so he was kind of alone, and so I went over and I introduced myself, and, he introduced himself, and I said, I don't recognize you. We know a lot of the priests in the area. He's like, no, I just got here. I've only been here 3 days, and I've never been to Texas, but I got assigned here in spring, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, howdy.
Your hometown.
And my stomping grounds.
Exactly. Spring's not really in the country, but I like the country accent. Suburbia. I think ExxonMobil's
You're in
based
Texas.
Spring. They have like their $1 billion campus of ExxonMobil's in Spring. I'm from the backwoods of Spring. Okay.
You haven't actually been to some of the places in Spring.
That is true, actually. There's a few spots. So this priest is great because he's like literally just got here 3 or 4 days before this event. So I introduced him to Mary Lisa, and I'm talking to him like, where are you from? And he says, Wisconsin. And I blow up. Okay. I'm like, I love Wisconsin. And you're just a guy when I'm not around you. You know, I'm like, I work with a guy from Wisconsin. You know how it is. It's just easier. I don't want to say Steve Carlin, and then it ends up like, he heard your confession 10 years ago and he's scarred for life. So I launch into why I love Wisconsin. And he's like, so have you been there, you know, for your job? I was like, yeah, I've probably been to Wisconsin, just total the pro-life movement 25 times easily, gone around the whole state, blah, blah, blah. And I realized that I'm breaking my own rule, which is like, shut up and allow the other person to actually say something. So I go through Sheboygan, the Brats, cheese curds with Dan Miller, Lambeau. You took me to the Cowboys game because that guy gave us his tickets, you know, 50-yard line Lambeau. And then he brings up, I mentioned the fried cheese curds and I said, but the regular ones are good too because they're squeaky when you chew them. And
nobody knows what that means until you've experienced it.
Yes.
He looked at me. It was like I just confessed to being the second gunman on the grassy knoll. He looked at me and was like, you have been to Wisconsin. So I was able to welcome this priest. We hit it off. We had a long conversation. He wasn't a stranger anymore in this event, and it's all because of you.
I'm bringing people together.
You are the epitome of unity. So I was very excited about that, and this is what Wisconsin brings to the table. Okay, this is a controversial topic we have, or at least the title is, The Pro-Life People Who Aren't Really Pro-Life.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like we're going to come out judging people, or like, well, you think you're pro-life, but you didn't vote for Trump, or you did vote for Trump, and neither of those is good enough. You should have.
And that's exactly what we're going to do.
There was a lot of that going on during the election season.
Everybody had a lot of feelings.
This is also in a good thing. This is an American thing. A lot of times when I go to Europe to our 40 Days for Life, you know, we have a heavy Catholic presence, obviously, with 40 Days for Life in America. But when you go to Europe and Latin America, it's like 95%, right? And it's funny because the Europeans, particularly the Brits, they're always like, why are some of the Catholics in America nuts? You know, and I have to kind of ask, like, for their, and it was along this, like, nothing's good enough thing. I think that's part of an American thing. Like, you're not conservative enough. You're not liberal enough. You're not woke enough. You're not just, I will have a standard so high on something that may not even really matter. Some things do matter, and those are good debates. But I will set the bar so high and judge whether you reach it or not.
A lot of purity tests.
Purity tests. And that doesn't mean, so if you kind of balk at this, you've compromised, head in the sand. You're the problem. And that's kind of the rebuttal. But I think it's important that we cover this because you see it on things that are secular. And certainly like a vote is a moral act. Writing a budget, like a budget is a moral document. You can't just frivolously spend money. But politically, there was a lot of, and it's on both sides of, you said this in 1987, so I'm done with you.
Though, interestingly enough, some of the post-election punditry, Nate Silver, the pundit, took note of how people were responding to the campaigns. And he said what he was, and leans liberal himself, but he said one of the reasons that Republicans won is because conservatives kind of looked at, like, if someone was like, hey, you know what, I'm pro-gay, but like I don't really want my 6'7" guy to be playing in my middle school daughter's basketball league. The Republicans would be like, well, great, well, common ground here. We found something we can agree on. And the liberals would tend to be like, nope, go to hell. You don't want 6'7" men playing in the middle school basketball league. You're out. And that was like actually a big factor in kind of like building a coalition.
The gay vote was a thing with the election because Republicans made gains. But yeah, I do think that there is this. You just find it with Hollywood. We've gotten feedback, and some of the criticism of the podcast is really good. But we've quoted Seinfeld to highlight something that's either funny about our culture or that shows how selfish we are. And we'll get an email. We got one recently. Seinfeld has an episode, an abortion comes up, and half the people, or all the characters are for abortion. Putty was pro-life. One day they're going to change that law. But like that just, then you're like, you can't ever quote Seinfeld because they had an episode about it. Like we don't think Jerry Seinfeld is like the epitome of like the mouthpiece of the pro-life movement and all that's sacred.
Plus, nobody was more effective at displaying the narcissism and the selfishness of that worldview than Seinfeld.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think there's this tug of war, and I think people can get caught up in it where you're just not pro-life enough. And I'm guilty of this. I've done this to people, particularly when I was younger.
Yeah, it's. I think we're building here, right? Like we're a movement of converts and conversion. For every St. Paul, I think there's 99 who gradually kind of see the light, and that's something we've seen with the former workers, right? They're very rarely jumping out of Planned Parenthood and now this is why contraception is bad. Usually, it's kind of a gradual awakening, and we need to, I think, facilitate that and not make it all or nothing.
I think the loudest voices in the movement are they're so adamant about being very clear about what we stand for and what we stand against. So, such as a case like what you said, and that's what happened with Abby when she left Planned Parenthood. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not ready to drink the Kool-Aid. Like, I may be against abortion, but slow down. I'm still for all these other things. And it's like, okay.
That's fine. You were running an abortion clinic a week ago.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
You're not doing that anymore.
I don't think a lot of us have that instant conversion on everything that is sinful, and
I think this came up with IVF a lot in the political realm because I'm adamantly against IVF. I'm a Catholic. I always have been. I was fortunate enough to have good catechesis from priests. It made sense. I was in middle school, high school. I learned about IVF. I'm against it. I want everybody to be against it. Otherwise, I'd be a loser Catholic, And I think there's good reasons. We've put chapters of books, on IVF. We've done podcasts on IVF. We actually haven't gotten a lot of hostility. None, actually, that I know of. Any hostility of people. Mainly the feedback is, oh, I didn't know that about IVF. It makes sense. There's no way I expect us in 2024 to have a presidential nominee who's against IVF. I would love that. I would think it would be the greatest thing ever. But we're just not there. And I wish we were. But this like shocking thing of Trump's for IVF along with every other human, besides, by the way, only 8% of Catholics, because the catechesis has been dismal on this. They're just the whole world's for IVF. So there was like a line in the sand for people. And I'm like, but this was only an issue because Roe was overturned. Like, it's kind of ironic. They are not going to let you get IVF and they're going to, dismantle your interracial marriage. It was all this lunatic stuff because they couldn't talk about abortion. George W. Bush, he was horrible on stem cell research. There was a lot of stuff that he did. Every presidential candidate has done that. I just think that's an example of I hate to say unrealistic because people get all offended at that, but that's what it is. And I guess you can just not vote, which is totally your prerogative, but it was just this all or none, like, you wouldn't have voted for St. Augustine. He had some wacko beliefs, but he was a saint and one of the doctors of the church. So there's just the all or none.
And you can recognize that the culture or our politicians are not where they ought to be without compromising our own stance on these things. Like, we've been willing to say, like, okay, we're okay. We're glad that Trump beat Harris, even though we don't love all of his positions. And at the same time, we're not going to carry water for Trump's bad positions on IVF or abortion or anything else. We can say, no, this is the truth. We'll take as close to the truth as we can get from those who represent us and continue to win hearts and minds until the day that we see actual justice in our policy on these issues.
Well, and if you did that, nobody would have ever voted for him because he was pro-choice most of his life. And he's literally the president that overturned Roe v. Wade, which everybody forgets about. How many March for Lives you go to was it, hey, Roe v. Wade has got to go. That's their cheering the whole time, which is fine. It rhymed. But then it happened, and it was like, oh, this is awful. So that's where we get to this part. Okay, a recent piece in Reason magazine makes a compelling case that the overturning of Roe v. Wade was an inflection point in which pro-lifers suddenly and decisively turned against their pro-life convictions.
Yeah, it's something that has happened, but we have to recognize why did it happen, how did it happen, and what can we do about it? And that's what we're going to talk about on this episode of the podcast. And it really comes down to, we saw during this past election, 7 of the 10 pro-abortion referenda get passed to enshrine a right to abortion in 7 state constitutions. That follows, we won 3 of them, but that's still a 3-7 record. And prior to that, we had lost 7 straight state-level referenda on abortion. And in some cases, they've been like 60-40. We're a 50-50 country. How can that be happening? And there are pro-lifers who are going against their pro-life convictions at the polling booth or elsewhere. And I think a lot of it comes down to this article from Reason that you mentioned, Sean. I think this is such an important quote from this article. For decades, the most prevalent image of an abortion-seeking woman was one choosing abortion because she didn't want a baby. In recent years, by contrast, the news has been filled with stories of women who very much want children, but that find continuing a pregnancy threatens their lives, will end with a baby suffering and dying soon after birth, or will lead to similarly tragic circumstances. Front and center are stories of women for whom abortion is the only option compatible with compassion, health, and life. And so, in other words, the reason we're seeing pro-abortion referenda succeed in Missouri, which up to that point I considered the most pro-life state in the country, is because there are pro-lifers who are buying the lies. They're being told about these exceptions of rape, incest, especially the life of the mother, in some cases the eugenic abortions, and they just can't quite bring themselves to oppose abortion in all cases. And if it's all or nothing, a lot of these pro-life voters are saying, oh, we'll take nothing.
Let me ask on behalf of the listener, why do you think that Missouri is the most pro-life state in the union? Of course, I'm a Texan asking. Well,
they had even leading
Alabama?
I mean, there's a case to be made for a bunch of different states, but I think before Roe v. Wade was overturned, you had some of the strongest pro-life laws were in Missouri, and they had like the 7, like we've got some places, they've got a 24-hour waiting period before abortion. Missouri had 72, and they were basically, even before Roe, like largely abortion-free because they hadn't been able to keep a facility open.
No, their stat sheet is impressive, and really, I think they were the first ones, or definitely the second, but I think they were the first ones to go after abortion pills.
Okay.
And that may have been pre-Roe. I have to think back into I have to go into my notes. But where their state legislators were going after abortion pills and basically banning them from being shipped into the state, distributed in the state in any way, shape, or form. And the guy, I spoke at a pregnancy center event up there, and I met the guy who put the bill forward. He's basically like the most hated man in the state by the left, right? Because they're like, he won't even give us the abortion pills. So I understand that. But Louisiana and Alabama and Texas, I think that it's interesting because losing in Ohio, it's basically, well, if you can lose in Ohio, you can lose anywhere. And I think Missouri replaces that because it is a very pro-life state. But, it'd be interesting to see that something like that going to Alabama or Mississippi.
It just shows that we've got an issue that we need to address here, where you see a state like that, which should be, I mean, we're 50-50 as a nation. In a state like Missouri, you would think we would maybe win 55-45 or even 60-40. But the propaganda about like, well, women will die, I think we're slowly but surely defeating that by sharing the truth, but we've got a ways to go until people are ready. Because every day, I would say here at HQ, every day now we're getting an email that's saying, how do I answer my cousin who's telling me that this woman was prosecuted for having an abortion in Texas? How do I answer my daughter who says she's at risk of miscarriage and she doesn't want the doctors to be afraid to treat her with life-saving miscarriage treatment? These lies are getting through a lot, and out of fear, I think there are people who are legitimately pro-life, they're against abortion, and yet they're voting the wrong way because they're believing some of the misinformation, you might call it.
What do you guys think about, okay, there's this intentional misleading of saying that women will be punished or they will be, that healthcare will be withheld from them in terms of needing an abortion, because on one hand, they're conflating miscarriage and abortion. But when if they actually use the term miscarriage, where we are hearing them say women are going to be prosecuted for having a miscarriage. So they're actually using that term instead of abortion and lumping miscarriage in with that. How many of the middle of the road, middle ground people do you think hear that and believe that? To me, that would just seem like if I just was not really super pro-life, super pro-choice, or wasn't really paying attention to what was going on, and then I heard them saying, oh, the radical right-wing or the pro-life people are prosecuting miscarriage. Like, how believable do you think that is? How effective do you think that is at convincing
Enough
people?
to pass a referendum to make abortion on demand a constitutional
enough
right
people
in Missouri.
believe it. That
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a hot take. I think it's an obvious observation. I think it's genius. And when Roe was overturned, I said, and we've said, we continued to say, I hid behind Roe, the blanket of Roe. They never had to talk about abortion. It's one of the differences, like when Trump did the Hillary debate and he said they want to rip the baby apart on the 40th week. And he was all that stuff. They can't talk about that. They can't get into what an abortion is.
Yeah.
So my thought was, what are they going to do? And I thought that they would run off and say some crazy stuff. And they did that. They did the interracial marriage thing. And they did now they're going to fill in the blank. They're going to take away all your Snicker bars, whatever it is. It was just all this crazy stuff. Then they settled on these women are being arrested for having a miscarriage. And another woman
Died.
dead in Texas because of their abortion ban. I think that that's really brilliant because by the time you go and you research, and that lady who the Texas Medical Board, I don't know if there's a lawsuit. She should go to, I don't know. I don't like her. She claimed that she had to have an abortion or she was going to die. Was never the case by any doctor. Then the Texas Medical Board had to come out and say you had no life threatening. You just wanted an abortion. So she got on a plane and she went and had an abortion. And
Because this baby had a disability, right?
Right.
So
But-
that was
right.
that was the initial thing, and then it's
Her
like, oh
life-
no, now my life's in danger is what the real issue is.
She did a commercial against Ted Cruz
Yeah.
with her high chair, her empty high chair. We are devastated by what Ted Cruz did, which makes no sense.
No,
but like,
it doesn't.
If you did what Ted Cruz did, the high chair would have a baby in it.
Right.
And also, you got on a plane and I think she went to Colorado. I don't know where she went, and had an abortion. And now it's not misleading. It's just a blatant lie.
That's what's so difficult about this is if there's things that are misleading, you can set the record straight. If we have a difference of philosophy, well, what is the nature of marriage and why should it be one man, one woman? Those are things you can discuss. We're dealing with things right now that are so counterfactual that like our response, like I have people come up to me at a party and they're like, hey, what do I say about this like woman that died and they said it was because she couldn't have an abortion? Like, it's just not true.
Yeah,
And that's just a hard case to make to say like, no, it didn't happen, but it didn't happen.
That's why it's genius for them to do, because they immediately put us on defense and we're nowhere near whether abortion's good, bad, what it does, what it doesn't do. Abortion's gone. Now we're arresting women in their apartments and women are dying because they didn't get access to health care.
And we're so used to as pro-lifers like making the compelling case where we can go through and go into the detail and into the weeds and make, well, if you look at the law, section 32, subsection C, and people just, their eyes glaze over. We've got from this Reason article that we're talking about, here's a quote from it. A 32-year-old married stay-at-home Catholic mom who's against in vitro fertilization and surrogacy. Okay, so this is like our type of person, right?
She's crazy.
We just talked about in vitro, yeah. 32-year-old stay-at-home married mom against in vitro and surrogacy. She thinks abortion is harmful to moms. She thinks abortion is harmful to babies. She wants to end abortion, and she's not happy about states establishing legal protections for unborn babies. Why? She says, I don't know that the legal system is the right route to go with this. I'm worried that babies and women are going to die. And so to answer your question, Heather, like, I don't know the number, but here's at least one who like on board pro-life opposes protecting unborn children. She opposes not killing children because she's worried children will die. It's difficult to understand, but obviously their message is getting through as untrue as it might be. Yeah, fear is a powerful motivator.
She's going to be in a lot of political ads one day.
I think that makes skeptical people like me think, I think they're lying about the stay-at-home Catholic against abortion
Well, it's
against
kind of
all
like,
these
hey, how do we
I
line
can't.
up all your check boxes?
Right.
And yeah,
I mean, it may be true, but it does make me question that. It's
And
not
she
that
homeschools and practices NFP.
all the things. I don't know. But this is the fear mongering, and then the note you have here. She thinks the doctors will refuse to provide appropriate treatment for at-risk babies because they'll fear being prosecuted for abortion if something goes wrong at the baby dies. And the baby dies, I think is what that is supposed to say.
Yeah.
It's absurd. No pro-life laws are killing babies and women. They're not preventing women from getting health care. Like you said, it's actually pretty clearly defined in the laws, in the state laws. I've gone and looked at these myself, but the problem is most people are not going to do that. And this whole thing with doctors are afraid because they feel like their hands are tied because they're afraid of being prosecuted. Has this ever happened before in any other controversial type of thing? It's not like what they're saying. How do I say this? They're pretending as if nothing like this has ever happened, that physicians have never had to abide by legal statuses before,
Right.
which is ridiculous.
right.
But has it ever happened where physicians have been so afraid and confused, supposedly by what the law is, that these issues are just running rampantly crazy, happening? All these women are dying. All these people are confused as to what to do. Their hands are tied. The answer, is no. But
I don't think they're confused about the medical part because they know this is all BS.
Yes, they should. Well,
it's not confusion. It is fear that some angry left-leaning attorney who's ticked off about Roe getting overturned is going to try to sue them and use this garbage against them. So they're in there kind of stuttering. That's my half-educated guess. It's not the medical thing. They've dealt with this their whole career.
They've done this their whole career. There has to be regulation.
But now people are watching. She had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
He's like,
These stories are also often planted too. Like, I don't trust that a lot of this is organic when you get these stories. Like, think about when Roe was overturned and 2 weeks later, suddenly we had the pregnant 10-year-old who was forced to travel from from Indiana to Illinois. And just so happens that the doctor who had to send her across state lines to make this heart-wrenching decision was speaking at an abortion rights rally a week and a half earlier as Roe was overturned. Like, a lot of this stuff is just not organic. It's not like a real true-to-life story. They're coming in with an agenda and they're looking for where can we find the case that we're going to exploit.
the lady in Texas is the worst. Her child had a disability, as many kids do. She didn't want the baby. So then she fabricated the fact that her life was in danger and she was going to die without an abortion. Can you imagine lying about a medical condition? Let's do an analogy here. Can you imagine getting cancer and you saying, if only I could kill one of my kids, my cancer would go away? I mean, that's how absurd this is. She is blaming her kid for the fact that she doesn't want she wanted a baby. She didn't want that baby. And so then she goes a step further and says, but I'm going to die unless I get an abortion, which was not true, and all doctors said that's not true. So then she just gets on a plane and goes and has an abortion and comes back and doubles down and says that she misses the baby that somehow Ted Cruz killed.
It doesn't make any sense.
It was the weirdest thing, and so I think my 13-year-old was on the couch, and that ad came on back in the fall, and she said, "Is that true?" And I said, "What part of the commercial?" She wanted a baby and she didn't get one. I said, "No." Mm-hmm. She said, "Well, was it true that her life was in danger?" I said, "No." So my teenage daughter was like, "What is she talking about?" And so I had to explain. And the reason I think it's genius is because you got to go back and you've got to explain everything. And by then it's just too late. And this commercial's all over the place.
It's already stuck. It's already, everybody has already got that in their mind and they're running away with it.
I don't care. Maybe I'll be accused of picking on this woman. she has to feel guilty somehow. Like that's total BS. The whole thing was just fabricated. And in the end, sadly, she did go through an abortion. And we know that's not free. And we know there's no just emotional detachment from that. And just, I just couldn't believe it afterwards. She was debunked. And it's kind of like, go away. And shame on any political party or campaign strategist using a woman like that. So she's debunked, and then they make up a news story and put the empty high chair. And not to state the obvious, but there's a lot of people that miscarry that have empty high chairs, and it's just offensive. And you didn't. You went and had an abortion because your kid had a disability.
You intentionally killed your kid.
It's not even close to being the same. But then, because you intentionally killed your kid, you blame Ted Cruz. It's just...
Yeah.
Well, we had, during the campaign, one Saturday morning, I'm like cleaning part of the house, and like the doorbell rings, and my son's like, Dad, it's for you. Like, okay. And I got excited. We didn't have any political people at the door. Most people don't want them. I was ready.
Steve's got like all of his copies of what to say when.
So I'm like in like the scrubby clothes cleaning. I go out, and it's the Harris campaign, and they want to talk. I'm like, yeah, I'm here to talk. And Roe v. Wade being overturned comes up. He's like, it's a terrible thing because all the women that are dying. I was like, that sounds really bad. Like, who died?
That sounds really bad.
Way to sound insensitive, Steve.
No, it does sound really bad. Who were they?
Yeah.
Well, they're out there. What health condition required them to get an abortion is the only thing that would save their life. Well, my mom's a doctor. Do you think you know better than she does?
Oh, he went there.
He went
That
there.
was fast.
He went there quick, yeah.
Wow.
But everything else was cordial leading up to that.
It was pretty. It was
Okay, he knew.
Even that was fairly cordial. Like, we had a long conversation.
Well, what was your T-shirt situation? What was the message? Was this like a one of those T-shirt like Favre jerseys, or was this like
literally, what shirt was I
like
wearing?
was it like I love my German Shepherd and it was a picture of Pope Benedict?
No, it was Green Bay Packers with the G on it.
Okay, so you were one of the people,
I'm a guy. I'm just a dude.
just a regular
Man's
dude.
man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cleaning house.
Yeah. So
It wasn't the shirt with the swastika on it that said abortion, Hitler would have loved it.
it was not that shirt.
Okay,
no.
that shirt. I've known somebody, not you, who does own that shirt.
But you've got these stories. You've talked about some of them. You've talked about some of them. Then there's other ones where you hear like, this woman was denied a life-saving abortion. I go, that sounds bad. So she died? No. So she had the abortion? Also no. So then what part of this was like the necessary to save a life?
Yes, valid question. Ugh.
Okay, we got to get to Ali Zayak.
I don't know how to pronounce that.
Okay, apologies if we messed this up. Okay, here we go. Women forever have tried to have abortions, and then they just died. It's good to have people that are still alive.
The irony. All right.
That's from this magazine article. So women forever have had to try to have abortions, and they died.
Now,
It's good that people are alive.
Yes, this is where, see, those women were on the bathroom floors, remember?
Whoopi
Before
Goldberg.
Roe. Yeah. That must be what I'm talking about.
Nobody knows one. Nobody's ever met one.
By the way, as much as I went on about the ads and the Ted Cruz thing, and we're reading all this stuff and we hear all this didn't work. Kamala ran on abortion as number one issue, celebrating it, making it look as good as anybody could possibly make it look. I mean, she made it look as mainstream. She made it look as necessary. The ads, they had $1 billion. How many of those ads were on abortion?
Like all of them.
All of them. I mean, literally $1 billion worth of campaigning on promoting abortion, and they lost, handedly. So that should be the encouraging thing for the listener. But
Our next point gets to what Heather was saying. Like, of these pro-lifers that are allegedly not voting for pro-life, how many of them are actually pro-life, and how many of them are telling a story and checking some boxes?
So Maureen Flatley is a 75-year-old Catholic from Boston who claims to be pro-life, but she describes the current pro-life position as definitely too extreme.
too extreme.
Too extreme.
Steve and I.
You want
have a
too many
question.
people to live. Too many people to live.
Steve and I, especially after 2024, we are actually, since Roe fell, I'm so tired on both sides of the word extreme, because the pro-lifers say the Missouri law is too extreme. And then the pro-abort say they want to arrest women who have miscarriages. They're too extreme. But I'm extremed out.
I can even handle extreme, but it's those two are too extreme because it implies that there is a proper amount of extreme that is acceptable. What is it? How extreme do we want to be?
Yeah. Like, is there a diet extreme?
Yeah.
Caffeine-free extreme.
Just 1 calorie.
Is anything left of center or right of center extreme?
Everybody who's more conservative than I am is a fanatic, and everybody who's more liberal than I am is a communist.
There was one in Texas where the lady, she's a baby boomer, and she was like, but Ted Cruz's law, this is the only political ads we got in the fall, so I wish I lived in Madison. It's probably more entertaining. So Ted Cruz's law, it just goes too far.
Yeah.
And I like that. It goes too far.
Yeah. Some of those were recycled because I think the last election where Ted Cruz was running, they had that same thing. There was a couple sitting there. No exceptions for rape or incest. No this, no that. It's too extreme. It goes too far.
It'd almost be worth someone introducing, like, forget about the 15-week or the 6-week abortion ban. Introduce a 39-week abortion ban.
I said that.
Okay.
We should just do, I said 35.
Okay.
That's too far, Steve.
Yeah, it's too extreme.
It's too extreme. 38 and a half weeks. And you actually do serious. This is why we need like some kind of well-done Christian Catholic Saturday Night Live program that's actually on Saturday. That's really funny. But you just actually do this, and it's like Babylon Bee has a TV show.
I was going to say,
we're proposing a 38 and a half weeks. But what happens like on Wednesday afternoon after the half week? Well, this is biologically what happens or whatever. And you could just, kind of mock it, which is, I think, an appropriate response. It wouldn't pass from the Democrats.
Right.
That's the whole point. And that's why the election part of it went the way that it did. Trump got 9% of the Catholic vote. How long have we, as Catholics, rolled our eyes at all the ridiculous liberal Catholics that just vote pro-abortion? I know a lot of it's in Philly and Boston and New York and Chicago where they're just culturally Catholic and they could care less. But it's still like frustrating. But 9%, and they cited abortion. And I think it's because even your middle of the road semi-liberal Catholic is like, I actually didn't know that they supported abortion through 40 weeks until they told me. It was just awkward because they did it and then used the word joy, and it creeped me out. So the 9% is a significant swing. And it just shows that if you propose something like a 39-week ban, I don't think it would pass.
No, I think they'd say, well, abortions never happen at that point.
No, they would say we need what is medically needed to save and protect women. Mm-hmm. And this is their approach. This is like when you can kind of corner them of just asking, when is it appropriate to have an abortion? When can you sleep at night?
Going back to this lady who says that this is too extreme. She said that abortion bans will fuel neglect and abuse of children born to parents who don't want them. I think dismemberment and poisoning is a pretty bad form of child abuse. So that's interesting that she separated those two things. And a lot of people say that it's better for them to be aborted because otherwise they're just going to go into an abusive home. Even if you suggest adoption. Well, if they're not wanted by their parents, they're going to go into an abusive adoptive home because that's what happens all the time, apparently.
This is all abortion solves all your problems. We're in a cleaner air. The roads will be better. The environment will be better off. Dogs will be happier. All of those things where it just solves the world's problems. And when you target a group of people, you really have to do that. You definitely see it in racism where it's the blacks and you certainly saw it in 1930s Germany where everything, Hitler was sadly brilliant in just basically taking the embarrassment Germany had in World War II and instead of saying you got your butt kicked and you're not as good as you thought you were, they were able to build this like nationalism of like, no, we the Germans, we the pure race, we've been infected and it's the Jews. Well, why don't we have any money? Because the Jews took over our business. Well, why don't we have better schools? The Jews have everything boiled down to that. And it took, realistically about 5 years. Everybody's like, it was a decade, but like you can't get that that far where, you have little Polish kids yelling dirty Jew, to people, being gathered in the ghetto. So it happens very fast. And if you think, well, you're comparing them to Nazis, it's because I am, because the language is the same. Because no matter what, you get dehumanized. At no point can the baby be a baby. At no point does it have any dignity. It is only a problem. And that's exactly the way it was in the 1930s in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
These are interesting, and of course you can't go there. You can't say, "Oh, you're talking about the Holocaust now. You've lost the argument." Oh, you're talking about slavery.
I don't participate in that because there's two things that we go after that we have to do as pro-lifers. Number one is slavery, and it's not that that's an inappropriate comparison. It's that it's the only appropriate comparison because it's the only other time the Supreme Court's dehumanized a group of people. We just don't have anything else, thankfully, to compare it to. We have these two horrific, evil incidences. And so that's the comparison on that one. And the Jews, Nazi law dehumanized the Jews. So if they died, it was irrelevant. And of course, they did it to exterminate them, and they were very vocal about that. I just don't see how you can sit there and say, what about children with disabilities? What are these poor people going to do? What are these minority women going to do? What are these minority poor women going to do? And they just go down the list, and you're like, this sounds like eugenics.
What if they're left-handed?
I know. Well,
You're left-handed.
I am. What are you saying? Steve's a Nazi.
Steve's a Nazi, a closet Nazi.
When Roe was overturned, who was the guy? It was like a respectable journalist, and he wrote, not really respectable, but well known, I guess. Well, we'll just take all the unwanted children and send them to Kavanaugh's house so he can raise them. I think he threw Alito in there too. So you're just deeming all these kids unwanted. In other words, he's actually admitting that abortion kills a baby because if they're alive, they're children. But how is that so different? I don't understand why we think we're so great. We're incapable of dehumanizing a group of people, and yet we're just like, oh yeah, abortion's it's fine.
Oh, we've got progress in science and enlightenment.
And that's
Cast
fine.
off the superstition of religion.
That's fine if that was like human nature and we were all just like, it's like wanting to get your nails done. They clip your nails. Like, it's just cells. Like, what are you talking about? But we don't do that. Somebody says that they're pregnant and we want the baby. We're like ecstatic. We bombard the woman with questions and due dates and names. And do you think it's a boy? You think it's a girl?
Gender reveal.
That's actually elevated. I think that's as cheesy as it is because we're like old parents now. We're like, we just took the test and read the damn thing. But now it's like you got to have a cake or you got to have a cookie or it's like, Uncle Bill's going to jump out of the pond and he's going to be wearing blue or pink or whatever it is. There's a lot of creative stuff out there.
Sounds like a redneck gender reveal party.
You want to come to Tyler, Texas? We'll do a gender reveal. So you do all that. And that's a positive, right? It's all a celebration. And I just don't think we can do all of that and then say, if you kill them, it's fine.
This is where I think Heather again is right. Like in this article that we've been talking about, the Reason article, where they're talking about the pro-lifers who are not voting pro-life, they're not supporting pro-life legislation or candidates. Are they really pro-life? We've got a few other quotes here. The lady who we've been quoting, Maureen, she said, if you're going to force people to have children, okay, I'm not even going to read the rest of the quote. Once you start talking about forced birth, I'm sorry, you're not pro-life. You're using their language. I don't believe that Maureen here was ever pro-life at any point, as Catholic as she may say she is. We've got Megan Walker-Williams, who said, taking an innocent life is one of the worst things you can do. Okay, agreed so far. I think we're all agreed here. And taking an innocent life is one of the worst things you can do, and to avoid that at all costs is imperative.
Here we go.
But she would, quote, never, never, never get in the middle between a woman's ability to choose for herself what she is capable of surviving and coping with. So never, ever, ever take an innocent life unless you just don't really want to get involved in it.
Yeah, and I've actually got another one to add to this too, because I recently happened to stumble across this. There is a woman who wrote an article in Christian Century, and the title of the article was, "My Mother Said She Was Pro-Life, and She Worked at Planned Parenthood." How about that one?
Yeah, well, that's all just, yeah. No, but that's the cardiologist who owns the McDonald's. I mean, you're like, I'm all for it, but I do this. I mean, those people, I think everybody looks at and says, okay, I don't really believe you.
But to her point for this one, she says pro-life to this woman who works at Planned Parenthood who is supposedly pro-life. Pro-life to me meant pro-responsible life. I always told you your body is a gift from God, but it's up to you to enjoy it wisely. So
Right,
wise,
like Romans, right?
Enjoy it wisely. That makes me want to go eat Rudy's barbecue. Like, I'm going to enjoy my body wisely. Where's the
Sounds
potato
like a
salad
beer
at?
commercial, like drink responsibly.
yes.
It does.
Your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit. Enjoy it.
Yeah, less filling.
But if you enjoyed it too much, come to Planned Parenthood. That's the message here.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, this is why I don't mind the term anti-abortion over pro-life.
Right.
Because pro-life can be, we know what it means. It means you're against abortion, you support life because abortion ends a life. So, but when you do this and you say, well, I'm pro-life and I work at Planned Parenthood because I believe in pro-life, and you just fill in the blank with anything, and, Steve accidentally runs a red light, you're not pro-life, and all that stuff. So that's why when they say anti-abortion extremists, which I very much am, that's
Too extreme.
Too extreme. I always go too far. And so that whole thing is fine if we're anti-abortion. But the problem is they won't do the antithesis of that and say pro-abortion.
Yeah.
So we've got, of the pro-lifers who are not actually pro-life, we've got the ones who are just believing the lies. Maybe they're pro-life, but they're getting conquered by the fear tactics. Then we've got the ones who are not actually pro-life. They just like to say it so they can be like that. I went to 12 years of Catholic school, and I think. But then we've got another interesting category here, which I found in this article, which is kind of the conservatives who are conservative first and pro-life second. And they kind of take this libertarian position. We're like, yeah, of course it's murder, but like we're so anti-government that we don't even want the government to stop killing a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the only role of government is to protect the rights of its citizens and national security. And this was the argument of the plantation owners. I'll just go back to slavery and the Nazis because that's the argument. That's states' rights. We don't want this, invading federal government telling us how to make a living. Mm-hmm. Okay, you live in Boston, you have an apartment, great. I have 5,000 acres and I grow cotton. I need slaves. You really like your clothes, don't you? Leave me alone and you'll have more in the future. And that's the argument. That's the argument. And eventually we realized, or we acknowledged anyways, that it's a violation of the Constitution and a moral crisis and we couldn't sleep at night because we weren't really free.
We've got lawyer Mark Randazza who said, quote, "My co-Catholics are like, well, what about the rights of the fetus? I agree that's a living thing and it ought to have rights, and it sucks that it can't."
It sucks that it has to die, Steve.
But it does have to.
It does have to. Isn't that tough?
This sucks for those slaves. I mean, I don't think they want to pick the cotton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go say that to like a widow of like an Iraqi veteran, who's killed in war. Yeah, I wish he was here. It just sucks. He kind of died. You're like, what?
Golly.
The only way that the fetus can have rights is if we move the jurisdiction of the government from outside your body to inside your body. Once they're inside your body, there's no limit to what they can do in there. Bum, bum,
That's like a Pepto-Bismol commercial. But it's like, once it's into your body, there's no limits to what it can do. It's just unbelievable. I actually think this is a bad approach, unlike early on where they say, women are dying. Mm-hmm. And they arrested a lady in her apartment. She had a stinking miscarriage. These people are crazy. That's really smart. This saying, people die every day, bro. It sucks. that just highlights like one side of this is serious. And abortion, if you've had an abortion, if you've been through an abortion, if you do abortions, you know abortion is serious. It's not frivolous. And I do think we've seen more of that in a post-Roe America where we get the goofy. What's that guy's name?
Mark Randazza.
He's some shady Italian.
He's an attorney.
Yeah, he's an Italian lawyer. He's like, it sucks. Ma ran over the dog. Sorry, sucks. It's just kind of like, he's not serious, right?
And this is why this is a bad argument, because the focus right here is on the baby and the rights of the baby. The whole like women are dying, it takes the discussion away from the baby, what the baby is, what fetus means, and so they can kind of like, to quote Matt Walsh, decenter the rights of the fetus. But here, this guy says, the government that has the power to tell you can't have an abortion is the same government that has the power to tell you have to have an abortion. So I'm kind of wondering, does he think like we should get rid of the drunk driving laws? I mean, drinking is inside your body. That's the government regulating what happens inside your body. Now, if we ban drunk driving, are we going to, that same government could force us to drive drunk?
Absolutely. And you could tie drugs into that. You could tie, when you look at any over-the-counter drug, it has the warnings or straight out ban of if you're under 12 years of age, and if they want to chop children up, to transition, well, why can't you give your kid all the Advil he or she can take? We don't act like this in the real world. We have a lot of regulations over our bodies. Some of them are just, some of them are unjust, but abortion kills the baby. And that's what this is about. And that's what the problem is, that abortion kills a baby, right? And we always have to remind them of that. This is, again, Ali Zayak. God gave people free will, and what people do with it is between them and God.
Here we are.
Enjoy your genocide responsibly.
Yeah, now drink this here Kool-Aid. That's pretty creepy. What you do with your free will is between you and God. Who can you say that to? Ted Bundy?
Yeah. Again, this goes back to conflating license and freedom, and those two are not the same things. Just because you have the freedom to do something physically doesn't mean that you have the license to do it.
Sean, you've often said that in the modern mentality, hell is a one-bedroom apartment and Hitler's the only one in it. But I think that Ali here, I don't know, God gave him free will.
Yeah, Ali, you're going to hell if you don't get it together. It's absolutely crazy. God gave us free will. What we do with it is between us and God. I guess you can tell that to the woman who's been beaten by her husband.
Yeah, it's totally fine because he had the free will to do it.
Yeah, and she has the free will to take it or leave or, just...
I wonder how Ali feels about Michael Vick.
I will refrain from commenting on Michael Vick. I think we were a little harsh on old Mike. The guy ran like a 4.240 at Virginia Tech. All right. So what do we do with this information? I think number one, and we saw this in the election, we kind of referenced it, you just can't believe all the hype.
Yeah.
It's a lot of noise. Just skip over it. Number two, education and outreach, as we mentioned. This is one of the reasons that we wrote What to Say When Part 2 is because all these new arguments. But that whole shift of it was ridiculous when we were reviewing the book and we're reviewing the chapter, abortion is not miscarriage, where we have to address that in the book. And you're just sitting here going, if we would have gone back in a time machine to 2008, Sean and Steve, where they would have come in the future and they're like, hey, let me see some of the chapters. And you're like, you guys are morons. This is common sense. Why are you writing this? But it really had to be done. And people do change their minds. And people also don't buy the hype. And we're not putting too much emphasis on the election, but it's definitely a telling sign that 2 years after Roe fell, when abortion is just the greatest gift and it's under attack and we got to save it, she runs on abortion. It just didn't stick to the wall.
The outreach does work too. As you mentioned, hearts change. We had a situation in the most recent 40 Days for Life campaign where this guy showed up to the vigil with just a rude sign, it had a curse word on, very rude curse word, and an arrow pointing at the pro-lifers. And the leader of the campaign walked up and kind of just had a basic conversation about abortion, and I saw the video of it actually. That conversation ended where the guy took his sign. He's like, "I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. I just
No way! I love it.
Yep. Yeah. And people not only they do change their minds, they are changing their minds just like this situation. But even if you're on any of the major social media platforms, you probably see almost any time you check it, there are these videos of all these well-known speakers that are going around to college campuses. They're setting up a booth or something, and they're just having conversations, and there's like 3 different cameras on them, and people can come up to the mic, and there's people that are asking them questions that want legitimate, and they're sincerely asking these questions, and there's others that are just bringing all the ammo, thinking they're going to just completely destroy this, famous person that's on the campus. And quite a few of these conversations you'll see light bulbs going off with people. And what I'm thinking is we're watching these 2 people, but I like looking at all the other people around, because that's planting seeds and affecting other people who are thinking to themselves, I have never heard this before. I've never heard such a well thought out argument. I've never thought of it this way. Now I'm changing my mind, but they're not saying that. And I think that one person who might say that on the microphone represents so many more people, because they're afraid to speak out, because the cancel culture is still real, especially on college campuses. You can't do anything pretty much without being canceled. And then there's no telling how many hundreds of thousands of viewers online who are watching this from the comfort of their home, sitting on their couch, looking at their phone, watching these little videos, and they're just, they're thinking this. Now, there's going to be, of course, a lot of people who are still using this to make excuses and say, oh, well, they're just lying about that, and they're going to continue to believe the pro-abortion lies. But I think there are a lot of people that are, because people are finally getting more articulate about their stance, and thanks to books like What to Say When and What to Say When To and other pro-life apologetics books out there, people are finally kind of speaking out more, or they're educating themselves more on this. So I think, like you said, it's not to despair. It's not a time to despair, but definitely a time to be hopeful and to keep on gently challenging.
And for the listener, the viewer, of course, we joke about these things and it's funny, but people do change their minds, and we have to have that in as our end goal. And you said something like the people that are kind of like looking, and rethinking everything. Mm-hmm. God bless the ones who do say afterwards, that's an interesting point. I've never thought about it.
Yeah.
This is in the most extreme, to use our new favorite term, examples. It's happened to me 4 times with very pro-abortion reporters, where at the end, it's always off the record. They're not going to be on the air going, well, that was a great point. I never heard that. But it's happened to me 4 times where we go off the air and I'm like, well, thanks for having me, just doing the normal thing. And they're like, hey, I really got to say that. I've never heard that before. That's a really good point. It was a very interesting point. I'm going to have to think about that. They say it like that, some version of that. 3 of those 4 were on rape. Mm-hmm. The most extreme stance that we have. The 4th one was on forced birth.
Yeah.
So I just say that as a compliment to those reporters. They didn't have to say that. They could have gotten off and thought, actually, it kind of made sense, even though he's a white bigot. But they didn't do that, and I think we need to do that. And I've done that in conversation.
Yeah.
And it is, well, my daughter was raped. And I was like, that has to be tough, that your daughter was raped. And there's no shame in walking with people to get them to a certain spot and admitting that you can relate to them, even if you don't agree with them, but you can kind of connect with them. So
I've seen that. I've actually had that happen 3 times over the last few years. Same thing, where where I'm expecting that they're not even going to include anything that they're interviewing me about.
Right.
But then they afterwards say, wow, I've never thought about that before. I had a cameraman say that to me one time, which was really cool. I was like, okay, cool.
That is cool. That is cool. And who knows what our cameramen think? They're probably all lunatics. But other cameramen out there are very open-minded.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Producer John is listening. This is going to get edited out. I hear grumbling. They want lunch. Okay, so one of our let's go through this really quick. When we challenge people, and this is a big what to say when point, the best thing is what's wrong with an abortion? Mm-hmm. Or what is an abortion? Or when you have fake pro-life Maureen Great New England name, by the way. I love the East Coast names. Irene, Maureen. I love it. There's a few others. The whole, like, I'm pro-life, but I'm really pro-abortion. Why are you pro-life?
Yeah. It's good to push back a little bit. Like sometimes we like have this default kind of wussy position of like, well, we'll agree to disagree. And I'm not saying you need to like bowl somebody over until they agree to become pro-life, but I would never agree to disagree. I think we simply point out where they're wrong, and we can do that factually. Like, where are your facts wrong? Like, this woman didn't actually need an abortion because this is what happened. Or we can point out where they're wrong logically. This is like for the libertarians. If there's any, as you said, if there's any legitimate function of government, it's to prevent people from committing violence against weaker people. And I think that's a good faith argument that I think is hard for most people to refute. They may refute, well, I just think, a lot of times, I just feel, and okay, at that point we're just at a feeling, right? But you can get them on logic, not for the sake of getting them, but helping them recognize the inconsistencies in their own position.
The libertarian thing is big. It got bigger because there's more libertarians, mainly because of COVID and just a lot of the weaponization of the DOJ. And who was the guy? There was like one guy that voted against the Patriot Act. I know it was Ron Paul was one of them, but there was somebody else. But that whole notion that the government is after us used to be like, Ron Paul wanted to abolish, like the CIA, and you're like, well, what's going to happen when the terrorists want to kill us? And now everybody's like, I don't know, I could see the argument, and we just have become more libertarian. You saw it with Trump's campaign. You saw it with some of this RFK stuff. He certainly has some libertarian stuff, but that's more popular now, and I've seen it trickle into abortion.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't want the government inside my body, and it's like we can't kill people. So I think it's very, very important.
I think sometimes the people who are lying to us from the abortion industry, from the government, from whoever, it's not so much that they want us to believe them, it's that they don't want us to believe anything. And now we're kind of at this position where you can't have a cohesive society if we don't trust each other on a basic level, but we become so cynical, and for good reason, that like, okay, well, just get the government out and I'm going to do whatever I want.
And I trust God and I trust human nature, and I am really worried about that woman. And that commercial will not age well. It's really sad. She's like in her kitchen. She looks like a mom, right? And they've got the high chair and all that. Now you kind of think it's going to be like, we need to lower food prices. That's what I first thought. I thought it was like you gather around the kitchen table and you're trying to figure out how to budget for the kids. And so they have the high chair. And then when I realized it was an abortion thing, like when she's 60 or 70 years old, or however, she knows that she paid and went and had an abortion because she didn't want a baby with disabilities. And then as horrible as that is, like as tragic as that is for her, even though she thought it was the right thing to do, it's still horrible to go and have an abortion. To just like lie about it and say that the baby died because of Ted Cruz, it's so bad. I've never seen anything like it. What to say when part 3. But it's just one of those, we could have never, I think explaining it to my teenage daughter, really showed me how crazy it is. But that's just not going to age well. It's going to be awful.
The most dangerous lies we tell are the lies that we tell ourselves. Like we can lie to other people and it's a terrible thing and it's immoral. But when we lie to ourselves and believe those lies, there's no end to the things that we can do in justification of those lies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Factually, I like this. If we're talking about the government involvement and how poor those arguments are, I like this. Factually, actually, it's abortion that increases child abuse. If you're talking about abortion being the solution to child abuse,
it skyrockets after abortion.
Mm-hmm. And if there's a legitimate function of government, isn't it to protect the most vulnerable from violence? And that is a very valid question. That's typically what it's supposed to be, one of the major things it's supposed to be for. So if we're talking about vulnerable people in the womb in particular, why would we not want to protect those individuals?
I will say as we close out, I think it's a good sign that we have science and now law, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. We have this huge, robust, hostile, I think, abortion debate in the United States of America. And it's always a good sign when one side, a segment of them, is just pretending to be on your side. So they're like faking pro-life to be like, I'm going to give you a weird angle. Let's try this. And they weren't doing that.
That's interesting. You don't have anyone being out there like, I believe in a woman's right to choose. Now here's all the reasons you shouldn't have abortions.
And if you do, it's like weird, quirky, dateless pro-life guy. Like, it's just like, I got a thing for you. I actually believe in abortion. And then they're like, what do you mean? And, you're like, it's just, but it doesn't work, right?
No.
And this doesn't work on the other way. Like, I'm really, really pro-life. It's sad that we really need abortion. What? So I think it
just sucks.
It just sucks, man.
Sucks, yeah.
People die. That's still, I think maybe, I don't know how you rank these arguments. I guess it's my favorite. I don't know. But the guy that was like, because I explained like what abortion does. It kills the baby. He's like, yeah, it kills a baby. And I'm like, yeah. And so I'm going over, I guess, why that's wrong. And he's like, people die every day, bro.
Great.
That's where we like, it's not condescending or judgmental. We're just like, I think we're actually serious about this and we're the only ones. So people die every day. Bro, I do not recommend that t-shirt. Steve, take that bumper sticker off your car. So I want to thank everybody. Be sure to, hopefully this inspired you somewhat to grow in confidence in discussing abortion. If you need a little help, get What to Say When 1, get What to Say When 2. Use these podcasts, to take this message out into the culture. And be sure to rate, review, and share this podcast. And we will see you next time. God bless you.